And our vision of the future, for a long time, it kind of been that, at some point computers were going to get smart, and we weren't sure if they were going to be, hostile or benign. But really, that was the expected thing that was going to happen. That was going to transform the world. Instead, what's happening is the hybrid between us and computers. The technology that we're just kind of infusing into, our day-to-day lives, into our psyche, is becoming the future that's actually unfolding before us. We can think about any kind of network like this. A lot of this is really about communication and speed and bandwidth. It used to be if somebody wanted to send a letter from Europe to the US, it had to go through several nodes, and it might have to go across the ship. It might take several months to send a letter. Then it was a few days. Then it was, hours. Eventually we got things like the telegraph where we could send it instantaneously, or the telephone. Those were very, very expensive back then. For most messaging, it was still kind of like, sending a letter in a few days travel distance. Now, there was a lot of attempts to speed this up because they kind of realized, how important it would be if communication, if information could flow much more freely. There was a point in Lower Manhattan where they actually wired all of Lower Manhattan, New York, with pneumatic tubes, and they did all the mail delivery. They had these tubes going to all the buildings, and it was this amazing switching system they had back around 1910. Eventually, these tubes started clogging up, and they realized it was just way too expensive to maintain this system. So it only lasted about 5 years. It was like this kind of dead-end technology. But they actually had plans. They were assuming that was going to work beautifully, and eventually it would be utilized for things like transportation. And they'd actually, like Futurama, have people going in these tubes as well. That was, kind of their expected solution to the information bandwidth problem. In the 50s, there was this whole weird thing about rocket mail. They figured that, they could get mail across the country much faster in a rocket. And they were actually kind of serious about it. There was a German guy that went around kind of shopping this idea, and he demonstrated. He'd fill a rocket with letters, and half the time the rocket would blow up, and all the letters would be confetti. And even the U.S. Navy got into that, and they did some demonstrations where they were using U.S. Navy missiles and sending missile mail. I never quite got the landing part of this. I just imagined this giant, set of craters outside of New York where all the rockets were supposed to land. But this is one of the examples of why I love the internet. I tend to trip over stuff like this all the time. Now, computers, when they first came out, weren't that useful. They've been around for a while. But they did eventually get efficient and useful and start transforming the world. We got things like email, where now we could send a message, to anybody in the world in a matter of minutes. And it was interesting, that wasn't even fast enough. People started going to text messaging and Twitter and all this. So it continues to evolve in interesting directions where basically we're connecting more and more people across the planet at higher and higher rates. Not only peer-to-peer, not just like a telephone, or broadcast, which is typically controlled by a few media conglomerates. But we can do any combination of the two. We can narrowcast, we can publish, we can do peer-to-peer. We can also do it synchronously or asynchronously. And it's amazing how valuable the asynchronous side has turned out to be, when we always assume that synchronous communication would be the most valuable aspect of it. Now, whenever you get any kind of system like this, and you start allowing it to communicate in interesting ways, it starts to specialize. And this is true in almost any type of complex system. When the nerve cell first developed, it really allowed multicellular creatures to evolve specialized organs, and really is the communication, that allowed this large assemblage and the specialization to operate and kind of reach a higher level of functionality. Communities are working like that as well. My map for communities many years ago used to be going into a newsstand and looking at all the weird little magazines that existed. And these are the people that are into sport trucks or into knives or into sailboarding, whatever it was. For me, that was kind of like a map of communities. It was a very discrete map. Most newsstands will only carry maybe 100, 200 magazines. When Usenet first arose, pretty kind of early internet days, I right off the bat was noticing this amazing diversity of communities, from very small to very large, and in some sense, there was no land shortage here. You can look at any internet community, and they're very nested in interesting ways. Like you can imagine a movie site. Basically they'll have subsections for the different genres of movies. Even within those, they will have subsections and subsections. And these different sections actually interact in interesting ways. They actually talk to each other. They converse. If a new show comes out and they're wondering, is that science fiction or fantasy? These two groups will have conversations between these two subminds. Or it might be, which of these could win in a battle? The Borg cube or the Imperial Death Star? Which is the best captain of Star Trek? And so these conversations are happening even within these communities at all different levels. These kind of practical communities, practical conversations. Now, SimCity, the classic economic view of cities was that you had people competing to live and buy the land closest to the city center. But obviously land in the center of the city was more valuable, and it came down to who valued that the most. So commercial zones valued that typically most compared to residential and industrial, so they would bid the highest. And so you basically get this very particular, what's known as the rent bid gradient. And the structure of a lot of cities can be kind of explained in terms of people competing for land within a city. That was the central theory. Somebody at some point, about 30 years, turned that around and came up with what's known as human ecology, which is that more and more it was looking like it wasn't so much people competing for land as it was land competing for people. If you can imagine the rise of like homeowners associations, gated communities, things like that. Basically, you had these communities that had desirable people that they wanted to attract into them. And so it's kind of flipping the model around. And that's much more what's happening kind of in the online world, is that we have all these online communities. We have no lack of land space. But they're all basically rushing you, saying, join us, and this is basically what keeps them alive. This is what fuels them, is trying to attract people, participation, and time into them. In some sense, any one of us, we're a member of a number of different online communities, and in some sense, a member of a number of different hive brains. And I think of these more and more as hive minds that are kind of interacting on the web. Some of these people, are very low involvement. Some are very high involvement, depending on the subject and what they're doing. You'll always have this kind of characteristic curve of involvement. But there's a specialization that's happening, not so much even with land, but with actually the people within that. So you actually, whenever you have a system like this, of people coming together, cooperating in communities like that, it naturally goes towards specialization, no matter kind of what the context is. So, in some sense, I think as entertainers, what we are now having to more and more entertain are these hive minds, not so much individuals. And this is the psychological component, where people are basically forming these social experiences on top of and around the entertainment experiences that we hand them. One thing that we've noticed, obviously, is that these hive minds have a voracious appetite. It's amazing how quickly they can consume content. But at the same time, they have a huge collective effort, that if you can apply the collective effort of a community, you get amazing results.